Start recording, and gentlemen, you can take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bruce Lynn. I'm one of the managing partners of the Financial Executives Consulting Group. Thank you for registering and attending for our webinar for this afternoon. In a few short moments, we're going to be starting, but just a couple of administrative announcements. One of them is that you are in mute-only mode, which means that you can hear me, but unfortunately I cannot hear you. During the presentation, if you have questions, it would be best if you were to type them into the question box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And then at the conclusion of the formal part of this presentation, we will take all of the questions. And if we don't get to all of them, not to worry, we'll take them offline, especially if you have questions that you don't want to have sort of read over an open mic. With that, let's start our formal presentation and talk about injecting certainty into an uncertain situation. Jerry, would you like to start the presentation?
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you also to Jameson, and a special thanks to the folks at Palisade Corporation, without whose products and assistance this presentation would not be possible. My best guess is that this presentation is somewhat less than 30 minutes, so that there should be ample time for Q&A at the end, as Bruce just mentioned. What you're looking at on the screen is a Merriam-Webster definition of a process called simulation, which I thought best depicts what we are going to be talking about today. So with that, let me get started, and it is really a pleasure for me to talk to you about this subject matter, as I am a member of the Financial Executives Networking Group, a former Chief Financial Officer and an Assistant Treasurer before that. And as such, I recognize the importance of forecasting, and I can assure you that I have used the technique that I am about to show you to help me make better forecasts and, in the long run, better decisions. I'd like to first take a look at the landscape in which we plan. Donald Rumsfeld once said, "There are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. These are things we don't know we don't know." Stephen Covey said, "If there's one thing that's certain in business, it's uncertainty." And Claude Shannon said, Claude Shannon said, "Information is the resolution of uncertainty." Well, in the face of all of this uncertainty, the question would be asked, well, then why do we plan? Well, just like the family's outing or road trip, you can't get to where you want to go without a roadmap. As financial executives, your companies may have objectives for sales, earnings, returns on equity or capital employed. How are they going to be achieved within the national or global economic climate? In the next 6 to 12 months from this point, it's likely we will be at market rates and lumpy demand by customers. Your company may also have objectives for conserving cash future investments. How will this be done? And holders and their interests. To illustrate the planning technique that I'm going to show you today, I'm going to use a mythical company called the Osborne Company. Osborne is a manufacturer of widgets. It purchases a partially assembled product, adds its own manufactured components, and sells nationally. It's a 5-year-old profitable company with retained earnings of somewhat more than $100,000. it is a C corporation for income tax purposes. Let's advance to Monday, August 15th in some year, and a management staff meeting attended by the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Marketing Officer, the General Manager, and the Chief Financial Officer. The only item on the agenda is planning for next year. The CEO starts the meeting by saying, you know, the market has told us that we can't change the price. So I want your individual forecasts of unit volume. At that point, the Chief Marketing Officer says, well, our new production line has been functioning well, and there has been a positive reaction to the new widget design. So my best case, or most likely case scenario, is that we ought to be able to sell 989,300 units. The general manager leaps to his feet and says, that's way too high for the shop to handle. My best guess is 950,000 units. Despite the inputs from both marketing and the general manager, the CEO makes the final call, and he's reacting largely to what the street is expecting, and he says, let's shoot for the moon. I say 995,000. As this dialogue is unfolding, the CFO is deep in thought. How will we create a single financial projection with 3 disparate projections of unit volume? No mention has been made of purchased assemblies required to achieve those volume forecasts while maintaining inventory. And the CFO believes that they would have to purchase a minimum of 685,000 units, a maximum of 700,000, and a most likely case of 690,000. And bear in mind, these are sourced from several suppliers whose prices range from 37.5 cents to 48 cents each, depending on supplier availability. At this point, the general manager interrupts the CFO's thoughts when he says the following. There's been a lot of talk in the press about the possibility of an increase in the minimum wage. I have 9 people in the shop. 6 of them earn at the minimum wage of $8.25 per hour. I have 1,896 production hours for each of them without overtime that I need to put an hourly rate on. What are the odds of an increase and to what amount? There is some discussion, and then there is a group consensus that says there is a 30% likelihood of the minimum wage going to $10.50 an hour. The CFO is rolling his eyes when the CEO turns to him and says, take these figures that we've discussed and put together our most likely case scenario. We'll meet again next Monday and go over what you come up with. By the way, don't forget about that mandatory $20,000 bank loan repayment. There should be no problem meeting that requirement based on the numbers discussed, right? The CFO says, well, it appears that way, but let me see what the numbers look like. He hurries back to his office. He can't wait to put pencil to paper. He also has a glimmer of an idea that he would like to try, but first he has to create the, quote, most likely case scenario. He comes up with the following. These are the assumptions for his most likely case. He's going to use the marketing guy's forecast of units to be sold, the most likely case scenario for raw material units purchased, and he's just picked a number somewhere between 37.5 cents and 48 cents and settled on 40 cents as the unit price of raw materials. And he will not even consider in his forecast an increase in the minimum wage. From these assumptions, he generates the following financial statements. His income statement, as you can see, shows net sales of $989,300 because the selling price for these widgets is $1, and net income of $47,812. He also generates, supporting his income statement, a statement of cost of goods which shows purchases of $276,000, which represents that $690,000 of raw material purchases at the price of 40 cents. And as you can see in the detail for direct labor, there are indeed 6 employees earning $8.25 per hour. He creates a balance sheet that shows an ending cash balance after payment down of the bank loan of $22,360 and a current ratio of 2.52 to 1. The accompanying cash flow statement indicates that there is just enough cash generated from operations to be able to make the repayment of the bank loan. After creating these financial statements, he sits back and looks at them and reacts the following. He is satisfied but somewhat concerned that the mandatory debt repayment is barely covered. He's dissatisfied with the fact that this forecast did not address the wide discrepancy in unit volume forecasts. It did not address the wide discrepancy in raw material unit purchases. It did not address the wide range of prices for the raw materials, nor did it even consider the 30% likelihood of an increase in the minimum wage. His conclusion: we need a forecasting process that will give us sensitivity of key drivers and probability of outcomes. What we've just looked at is risk modeling the old way. What he has created is a single point estimate. Every figure has to materialize exactly that way in order for this forecast to materialize. Ask yourself this question: would you make a multi-million-dollar decision based on one number? Okay, let's say you create 3 forecasts, a best case, a worst case, and a most likely case. Would you make a multi-million-dollar decision based on 3 numbers? Take it a step further. Assume you have unlimited staff and unlimited resources. Would you mandate that your analysts run hundreds or thousands of scenarios for your million-dollar decision? How much will that cost, and will you get your analyses on time? What if something changes? What if many things change and change at different times? Managing risk then becomes cumbersome, time-consuming, and error-laden. What we're talking about is risk modeling the new way, using probability distributions. Probability distributions are the direct result of Monte Carlo simulations, a term we'll get into in a moment, which are necessary for making competitive business decisions and for balancing risk and return. Probability distributions furnish you with the full range of possible outcomes, how likely those outcomes are to occur, and identify those items that impact your bottom line most significantly and by how much. So his bright idea is to use Monte Carlo simulation. Well, what is it? It's really not rocket science. At its core, Monte Carlo simulation is a virtual experiment repeated hundreds, thousands, even millions of times, all the while generating random samples bound by a set of parameters that you define from each repetition of that experiment. Those random samples are collected and then organized and analyzed to help you understand the behavior of a simple or complex system or process. So with the idea in mind of creating, of using Monte Carlo simulation the CFO starts with the model that he just created, and he uses Monte Carlo simulation software, which is commercially available. He gives effect to the discrepancies missing from that scenario by assigning probability distributions to the key model drivers. You may already be familiar with normal or bell-shaped curve distribution, but there are many others. Which distribution to use is a question that always comes up. Historical data, expert opinion, or management gut feel are all acceptable answers to that question. With available historical data, it is possible to use simulation software to analyze the data and determine the most appropriate distribution to use. In the case that we're going to be looking at today, the CFO is using his own judgment. Let's move over to the Excel model and run the simulation. What you're looking at here is exactly the same income statement that I presented to you earlier. And I'm going to focus on, you see net sales here of 989.3 with net income of 47,812. And there is, I'll just move over for a moment to a cash flow statement, which is again the same thing that we looked at before, which shows the net change in cash of 1,275. Back to the income statement, and I'm going to focus on net income, and I'm going to use Monte Carlo simulation software and run not 100, but 100,000 to improve my confidence level here and actually start a simulation. And what you see happening basically is all of these what ifs are being asked. What if this is the result that occurs? Or what if this is the result that occurs? And all of those results are very quickly being sorted and put into buckets so that it presents us with this is a typical representation of a bell-shaped curve with a tail on the low side and a tail on the high side. But what I'm interested in is let me just expand this. So this is the first of, I think, an aha moment for you. Our single point estimate said we're going to make 47,812. Well, this is telling me that there's almost a 90% chance that the result is going to be less than 47,812. Let's move over to the cash flow. The model, as I was iterating the model, it was doing the same thing on the cash side. And if you recall, the cash number was, or the net change in cash was 1275. And again, there is almost a 90% chance that the result is going to be less than that. And as you can see, looking at the scale at the bottom, obviously most of these figures are substantially negative. So, as I said, these two charts, these are histograms, and these two charts are the first of what I like to call your aha moments, if you will. But I'm not going to change. Let's move back to the income statement chart for a moment and change the focus from the histogram to what we call a tornado chart. Now what you're seeing here is these are the four significant drivers or key variables in the model. The unit price of raw materials, increase in the minimum wage, units to be sold, and raw material units purchased. And clearly, unit price of raw materials is the driver that has the most significant effect on net income. Similarly, if I go to net change in cash and look at the tornado chart for that, the result is exactly the same. The unit price of raw materials is the key driver that is causing the pain, if you will, that we're experiencing both in income and in cash. So The histograms are the first aha moment. The tornado charts are the second aha moment. So let's go back to the slides now, and I can finish up the presentation, and we'll move on to a Q&A. But basically, our net income observations are that 90% of the results fall between a loss of $16,000 and income of $53,000, 10% of the results outside of these values. And as we saw, the single most damaging impact to net income was the unit price of raw material purchases. As far as the net change in cash observations, the model suggested that the company could really lose its shirt cash-wise, with 90% of the results falling between a cash shortfall of about $63,000 and a cash gain of only $7,000. With all of the results considered, the cash flow ranges from a negative $94,000 to a positive $18,000. The mean cash flow is a negative $26,000. What does this mean? The $20,000 mandatory debt repayment could be in serious jeopardy. And even more importantly, the bank and mortgage holder might be uncomfortable enough to foreclose against the company. So what have we learned? What conclusions can we make from this presentation? Single point presentations do not provide an in-depth picture of risk. Using Monte Carlo simulation gives you much greater insight into an uncertain future, points to areas where your risk can be mitigated. If you've not begun to collect history, it's a good thing to do. The past can be a useful resource for selecting the right probability distribution. The use of statistical techniques like Monte Carlo simulation can actually support management gut feel and lead to more confidence and better, more insightful forecasts in the future. In the example shown today, it led to the structuring of fixed price contracts with the company's raw material providers. Thank you for your time and attention. This is who we are. That's it. We'll take time for Q&A.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry. Let's see what we have in terms of questions. We do have a few questions that have come in. Some of them might be too involved to get to in this webcast, but I will archive them, and we can do it via email too. Well, it's this. Here's one of the first questions was, how do you input the variables and the probability into the software?
Okay. Let me flip back to the model. Let me go to the assumptions page. And what I've done here in this cell F10, for example, which shows units to be sold of 989.3, I have a little table out to the side. I'm using a distribution called PERT, which actually stands for Performance Evaluation Review Technique. It is a triangular type distribution, meaning it has 3 points, a minimum, a most likely, and a maximum. And so those 3 values are the values that were expressed by the members of management. And within Excel, using at-risk software, within Excel, I actually, in this cell here, converted or created a formula which says risk PERT and references cells J10, K10, and L10. And in order for the units to be sold to be displayed at the value created or the value suggested by the Chief Marketing Officer, I put in this risk static of 989.3. It's really not part of the formula, because actually if I took that out, what this value would show is the actual arithmetic a combination of the 950, the 989, and the 995 divided by 3, and that would be the distribution shown. A PERT distribution will give us a triangulation, but with a softer curve around the PERT, around the most likely value. Whereas a triangular distribution itself would simply be a triangle, and that really is a shape that does not exist in nature, where you've got, if you just picture an isosceles triangle and the apex of that triangle being a single point. Well, you don't really have a single point, but you have a curve around this point, if you will. By the same token, with respect to the raw material units purchased, there I use the uniform distribution, which means that any number between a minimum of 685 and a maximum of 700,000 is equally likely to occur. And again, I use the risk static to display 690 as the static value. And in the case of I also did the same thing with the unit price of raw materials. There, it ranges from 37.5 cents to 48. I have referenced each of those in J12, K12, J12, and K12, which are minimum and maximum. And as far as the increase in the minimum wage is concerned, I used a risk discrete function, which says there are 2 possible values in this cell, 0 and 1. 0 has a 30% of occurring. 1 has a 70% odds or chance of occurring. And over in the cost of goods sold, or the direct labor table, in this formulation, I've said for the 8 1/4, I said if the assumption cell F13 is equal to 1, use 8 1/4. If it's not equal to 1, use 10 1/2. So as the model will iterate, and actually I can, let me see, if I put the dice on and I press the F9 key, you'll actually see situations where the number changes as I, in a sense, iterate the model, because that's basically what I'm doing, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer that question?
Oh, that's a great answer. We have a couple other software questions. That's correct. At risk is an add-in for Excel.
Correct.
And if you want to go learn more about it, you can just go to palisade.com. Mm-hmm. That's PALISADE.com, and give us a call or an email if you have any more questions about the software. And let's see, we have some more questions here. Mm-hmm. How flexible is the software to model different industry data and complexity?
Well, I would say it's very flexible. Palisade, the at-risk and other Palisade tools, which you might also want to be familiar with, they make what is called a decision tool suite. At-risk being the flagship product, but there are other tools as well. And I will say that their tools are in use at over 94% of the Fortune 500 in multiple industries, oil and gas. I mean, it runs the gamut, and they are not necessarily all being utilized in the financial area, and that was really my focus here, was to try and utilize these techniques that are sort of well established on the production side, for example, determination of how likely is it that we will get oil from an oil well. That might be an application where at-risk is being utilized on the production side, but that same application not being utilized in the financial area of the same company. And that's what I was trying to do, is to bring knowledge of this statistical concept to the financial side of things.
Great. Oh, we have a number of requests. Can we have a copy, PDF of your slides?
Absolutely, I will make them available. Probably the easiest thing to do is I will make them available in PDF form, and I will put them on my website.
Great.
Which is www.jbsherer, SCHERER, consultinggroup.com.
Good. Oh, yeah, you could put your slide up too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do that. Yep,
Let's
there
see.
it is.
Let's see what else. Well, I suppose we have time for another question or two.
Sure.
We'll wait till they come in. Ah, yes, there is a trial version on the website. Ah. Ooh, talk about using management discretion or gut feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I look at it this way. We saw that in the example that I presented, we had essentially three functions within the company that were represented, all of whom, or each of whom, I should say, had a perspective on an element that was important to the plan. What was the basis, for example, of the analytics, perhaps, that the CMO, the marketing officer, had utilized to come up with 989,300? What numbers did he consider? How did he go about that process? By the same token, the general manager just immediately off the cuff said, no, that's way too high. You know, the best thing that we can do that I see is 950,000. Where did he come up with that number? So it would seem to me that if these are simply management's gut feel, that's the best thing to utilize here, but it obviously needs to be explored, analyzed, and in other words, how did your company come up with the assumptions that it is using in creating what you're doing today, which is creating if you're not doing anything like this, then you're creating a single point estimate. And you have, by defaulting to a single number for, let's just say, a forecast of unit volume, you are effectively saying, this is either my gut feel, or alternatively, you have hard information that says this is the number that we're going to use. I don't know whether that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it we have a number of interesting responses.
Okay.
And I think we have a good discussion here. Maybe a couple of them are a can of worms. I might not open them up, but where all the questions are being recorded too in a report that I'll send to Jerry and Bruce, and they can look them over and see how this actually incited some great discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see if we have a couple more coming in that we could answer, and then we'll. I'm reading them over now. I'm going to read this because maybe you can comment on it.
Mm-hmm.
So is it fair to say that after running all of the probable scenarios, the most likely event is not very positive?
That's correct.
Indicating that more work needs to be done, particularly on lowering unit costs.
That's correct. And in fact, what the conclusion that in my mythical example in this mythical company, what they decided to do was to perhaps lock in prices with their raw material suppliers so that they would not be subject to the vagaries of the market at a point in time that they required supply. So they locked in a price where they could actually, you know, see the impact as to whether or not they have been successful in mitigating their risk.
Mm-hmm. This is... Let's see. I suppose we can have time for one more question. And did Bruce, did you want to say anything that...
No, I think it's going well. I see a lot of good questions.
Yeah, good. These are good, aren't they? And
my only suggestion is that for those people looking for a copy of the presentation, it might be just better to push it out to them.
Sure, I sure will. You folks all have my email address. It's the one that the GoToWebinar sent. You can just reply to that, and that'll. I'm Palisade host at palisade.com. That'll come right to me too. We have a number of interesting things said about the procurement divisions of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Some choice words. Let's see. We'll just wait another moment or two. Well, maybe the I see some unfamiliar names, so I wanted to thank the FENG members for coming here. This is great to have you aboard on this webcast, and I think a successful webcast actually raises more questions than answers, and I feel like we've started a really good discussion here that we'd like to continue. Good. Well, what do you think? I don't see any more new questions coming in. If they occur to you later, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you're watching this recording sometime in the future, also feel free to reach out to us. Yes, we will follow up with some of the questions we weren't able to get to. Well, very good, gentlemen. I really appreciate this webcast and you taking the time for this.
Well, from my perspective, and this is Jerry talking, I'm very pleased to have been able to do this. I really hope that there has been some education transmitted here. I think that to use the technical terms, I am really trying to bring stochastic modeling to companies rather than deterministic modeling, which are, essentially single point estimates, which I frankly believe are worthless. So that is my view and my passion, and that's basically my view on the matter.
Well, thank you. That actually helps us quite a bit. Well, I'd like to thank everybody again for coming. And Jerry, thank you, and Bruce, thank you. And
Pleasure.
again, reach out to us anytime. And I'll conclude the webcast now. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
So how do you think it went?